Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're going to look back today at a few excerpts from chapters 2 and 4 and 5 of Daniel. And then I've got another secular historical source to share with you that could serve as an altar to an unknown God, if you will. In the tradition of Paul at Mars Hill, you have a skeptical friend who isn't interested in reading the Bible, but they already believe in secular historical sources. Well, here are some ways in which secular historical sources serve as this leaping off point to invite them into the Word of God, share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. Here is a quick recap. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel is telling Nebuchadnezzar his vision. Your Majesty, as you were watching, suddenly a colossal statue appeared. That statue, tall and dazzling, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was terrifying. The head of the statue was pure gold. That's Babylon. Its chest and arms were silver. That's Persia. Its stomach and thighs were bronze. That's Greece. Its legs were iron. That's Rome. And its feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. I believe that refers to the Antichrist's kingdom, the beast's final Gentile dictatorship over the earth. As you were watching, a stone broke off without a hand touching it, struck the statue on its feet of iron and fired clay, and crushed them. That, I believe, is the millennial reign of Christ. Then the iron, the fired clay, the bronze, and the silver, and the gold were shattered and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor that just blew away with the wind. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. See, that's Christ's eternal kingdom, beginning with that millennial reign. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. Your Majesty, you are the King of kings. Notice the lack of capitalization there. The God of the heavens has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and glory. That word given was his first chance to be humbled and avoid 7 years of animalistic insanity. Wherever people live, or wild animals or birds of the sky, he has handed them over to you and made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. After you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to yours, and then a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule the whole earth. So the Persians are not going to be as great as the Babylonians, but they'll be overtaken by the Greeks. But Alexander the Great's going to take over the whole world. A fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron, for iron crushes and shatters everything. And like iron that smashes, it will crush and smash all the others. Quick interesting point on this. I want to say that the atomic weight of gold is greater than that of iron, but gold is kind of a soft metal, and iron is just used for smashing stuff. You don't actually make gold hammers, right? If you do, please stop, or please give to the Redemption Church because you've got tons of money. It's not about the preciousness of the metals. In our eyes, it does seem to descend. Gold, silver, bronze, and then iron. But what Daniel says outright about his own interpretation of his take on this vision that Nebuchadnezzar had and didn't tell it to anybody, but it confirms that Daniel's accurate by the way he responds to Daniel's interpretation and recounting of it. It's just used for smashing stuff. And you see that the feet and the toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron, it'll be a divided kingdom. Some of the strength of the iron will be in it. You saw the iron mixed with clay, and that the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. Part of the kingdom will be strong, and part will be brittle. You saw the iron mixed with clay. The peoples will mix with one another, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. We didn't talk much about this at the time. I'll give hopefully a brief, quick insight. I'll show you these footnotes. I typically delete them just so that it's a clean look and it doesn't distract as we read the text. But I'm going to show you this one. So we're in Daniel chapter 2, and we have these footnotes, right? Here's what that footnote is. Another in the seed of men. That's what that footnote refers to. You saw the iron mixed with clay. The peoples will mix with one another in the seed of men, alternately, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. My humble opinion, which you can take or leave, is this refers to the demonic nature, the satanic power behind the beast's final dictatorship. How the devil is the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. And this kind of demonic possession, this kind of satanic inhabitation, it never lasts. It never works in the long term. The earliest example that we have of this is the Nephilim. You know, by whatever process, these spirits rebelled, left their natural place, and interfered with mankind. And it's a similar language to what's used here, but Genesis was in Hebrew. I believe this portion of Daniel is in Aramaic. But we still see multiple times when like the powers of evil will try to mess directly with us physically, and it never lasts. It can bring about destructive things. It can even seem to give the impression of working miracles. For example, in Acts chapter 16, when they come upon this woman who is inhabited by demons, and by that she seems to be able to tell people their futures, and they deliver her from demonic possession. She's following them around, saying something that's true about them, but just saying it in a way that is disruptive. They set her free, and the guys who had enslaved her were upset because now their money-making scheme is up. And so by this demonic possession, she was able to, whether it's because these are demons like saying what's going to happen and then doing that thing that they predict, whatever the case is, demonic possession does last for a time. When there's a father whose son is demon possessed, and this demon causes the son to throw himself into fire and things like that, he's desperate when he comes to all the disciples. No one can set him free. Jesus is the last one, and finally Jesus says this kind can only come out by prayer. Look at the example of Judas, who ends up killing himself when he's inhabited by Satan. And then consider the nature of the Antichrist's final kingdom. It's like iron mixed with clay. It's iterated so many times. First of all, it's just named like way up here. Partly iron, partly clay. And we continue down. We see more and more of it. He drives this home a lot. Iron crushes and shatters everything like iron smashes. It will crush and smash all the others. You saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron. Right? And we could see that it's iron mixed with clay. You saw the iron mixed with clay. He even uses those same words right here. He's really being emphatic about this. Partly iron, partly fired clay. Right? Just as iron does not mix with fired clay. This has got to be the most repetitive Daniel's ever been. He is like really driving home how iron and clay don't mix. And you'll have the brittleness of the clay with the strength of the iron. And this is what is smashed by the rock. Right? That rock is Christ. Just ask Paul, as he interprets the rock from whom water came to provide for the Israelites. That rock was Christ. He is the rock of ages. And he's referred to as the rock numerous times. We talked about that. But here's another example of him as the rock that destroys this final kingdom. And it's because iron and clay don't mix. Like the Nephilim didn't last. And no demonic possession has ever served as like a long-term arrangement that works well. Judas killed himself. The woman was delivered when like a legion of demons was cast into a herd of pigs. They ran off the cliff. And when the Antichrist rises to power, the real power behind him is the devil, and it just won't work. It won't last. It won't last. And who will come in and destroy it but Christ himself? He is the rock that's thrown not by a human hand, but he comes in and reigns forevermore. In the days of those kings, the God of the heavens will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. That's Christ's millennial kingdom. That's that rock that comes in and becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth, that destroys the iron and the clay. And this kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but itself will itself endure forever. You saw a stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it, and it crushed the iron, bronze, fired clay, silver, and gold. The great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is certain, and its interpretation reliable. So that's Daniel's first flyover of all the successive empires and even going into the last days. Now let's fast forward a little bit, because now with just hopefully that brief insight, if you don't care to learn from like a parallel with another secular historical source, this time from Herodotus and his histories, then feel free to tune out now. I just wanted to show that, but like here's something that is pretty interesting to me. It is Herodotus's take on the city of Babylon, and it described, this is my source that was in my sermon this past weekend for how I believe the Persians invaded Babylon, leaving the city intact. And it's not just me. This is a pretty common take. In Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, who did not listen to Daniel, is on an ego trip. At the end of 12 months, he has a year to listen to Daniel's warning of like yet another vision. And he just doesn't take the warning. As he was walking on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon, the king exclaimed, "Is this not Babylon the Great that I have built to be a royal residence by my vast power and for my majestic glory?" Look at this. He's walking along the roof of the royal palace in Babylon. And this, by the way, is like the moment that he's stricken with animalistic insanity for 7 years. He's out eating grass like a cow, covered with dew, which means that he's not in shelter. And he just looks like a wild animal. Then 7 years into that, he looks up to the sky. His sanity returns to him. And then God, in incredible graciousness toward this crazy guy, even restores him to greater glory than he had before. And the difference, the before and the after effect, is Nebuchadnezzar's confession that heaven rules. In Daniel 5, we've got the final king of Babylon partying with the precious vessels that were taken from God's temple. He's weighed, measured, and found wanting. If you're all about keeping up appearances, then this right here is your worst nightmare. Being publicly shamed, publicly humiliated, right there at the peak of your power. You're being invaded that night. You don't even know it. And here it is. The writing on the wall is, "You're not enough. You've been weighed and measured and found deficient." Like if your ego is out of control, that is the nightmare scenario. And you understand that Belshazzar, if he's pretty up on himself too, he wasn't just soiling himself because he saw the fingers of a man's handwriting on a wall. The thing that was written on the wall would be translated to confirm his worst fears. Like, you have been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found deficient. Your days are numbered. That number, by the way, is 1, and this is that 1, and it's up now. He's going to die that night. But like here, if you weren't with us for the sermon, Mene Tekel Parsin, I believe this was a play on words to indicate that it was the Medes and Persians that would take over, because the Persians were in his kingdom as the writing was being put on the wall. Then Belshazzar gave an order, and they clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain around his neck. Daniel, by the way, said, "Don't do any of that for me." They did it anyway, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. This is likely Belshazzar's last act as king. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed. So we open up Daniel 5 with this party happening in the palace at Babylon, the same majestic palace that Nebuchadnezzar would walk along the roof of on these massive ego trips. How is it possible that such a massive city surrounded by a massive wall, like if Herodotus' claim is true, it's like 15 miles long on each side. So it's 60 miles total in circumference. It's over 300 feet high and over 80 something feet thick. What? And then within that wall is another wall. And between those two walls is a moat filled by the Euphrates River itself. This is both the strength of Babylon and also the way in for the Persians. Here's what Herodotus writes about it. I know this numerology looks weird. I think he has 9 books, And each chapter, don't be freaked out. We're not about to read a boatload of really long chapters. One of Herodotus's chapters is like that big on my screen. Like it's just could be like 3 to 5 sentences. And the first book has 266 chapters. So really it's like 266 paragraphs. And then the ninth book has like 122 chapters. And when Herodotus says chapter, or whoever numbered this, think paragraph. My source for this rendering of histories is drawn from Tufts University, publishing it through something called Perseus. Tufts University is an extremely liberal university out of Massachusetts, but I'd be pretty shocked if they had the gall to go back and edit Herodotus, because he's available in numerous other places. But after this, I will double check and make sure that I'm looking at the quality rendering of it. Either way, here's what Herodotus writes. When Cyrus made all the mainland submit to him, he attacked the Assyrians. In Assyria, there are many other great cities, but the most famous and strongest was Babylon. Okay, I'd submit to you, dating back to the days of Nimrod, Babylon was well known. And many of like our modern pagan traditions, even some of the things that we've picked up and sort of redeemed as Christians around the Christmas season, have their roots in ancient Babylon. Where the royal dwelling had been established after the destruction of Ninus. Babylon was a city such as I will now describe. It lies in a great plain, and is in shape a square, each side 15 miles in length. Thus 60 miles make the complete circuit of the city. Such is the size of the city of Babylon. And it was planned like no other city of which we know. Around it runs first a moat deep and wide and full of water, and then a wall 83 feet thick and 333 feet high. 333 feet high. Crazy. The royal measure is greater by 3 fingers' breadth than the common measure. Further, I must relate where the earth was used and how it was dug from the moat and how the wall was constructed. That's a natural question, right? Because if you've got first a moat around the wall and then like a moat between the two walls, how do you build this thing? Because there's no naturally occurring place where you could do that. As they dug the moat, they made bricks of the earth, which was carried out of the place they dug. And when they had molded the bricks enough, they baked them in ovens. Then, using hot bitumen for cement and interposing layers of wattled reeds at every 30th course of bricks, they built the first border of the moat and then the wall itself in the same fashion. So it's waterproof. All right, river reed is waterproof. Hot bitumen and baked bricks are likely to serve as a water seal of sorts. On the top, along the edges of the wall, they built houses of a single room facing each other with space enough between them to drive a 4-horse chariot. There are 100 gates in the circuit of the wall, all of bronze, with posts and lintels of the same. There is another city called Is, 8 days' journey from Babylon, where there is a little river also named Is, a tributary of the Euphrates River. From the source of this river Is, many lumps of bitumen rise with the water, and from there the bitumen was brought for the wall of Babylon. So they went upriver like 8 days' journey, and that's where they mined everything. That's where they mined all the bitumen that they used as cement, as mortar between the bricks that they baked to make these city walls. Thus, then, this wall was built. The city is divided into 2 parts, for it is cut in half by a river named Euphrates, a wide, deep, and swift river flowing from Armenia and issuing into the Red Sea. The angles of the wall, then, on either side are built quite down to the river. Here they turn, and from here a fence of baked bricks runs along each bank of the stream. The city itself is full of houses, 3 and 4 stories high, and the ways they traverse it, that those run crosswise towards the river, and the rest are all straight. All right, so he's describing the alleyways and gates of bronze. Here's the word about the interior wall. These walls are the city's outer armor. Within them, there is another encircling wall, nearly as strong as the other, but narrower. Wow. This is a heavily fortified city. And this is, right here, the way in. The whole moat system and the outer wall, and then perhaps the moat between the outer wall and the inner wall, The Euphrates River is what powers that. If you cut off the flow of the Euphrates, which I believe the Persians did, it opens up an access point whereby you can infiltrate the city. And if you just cause the water level to dip enough, you might go in undetected. And that's likely what happened because they came in undetected. Here, he's describing some of the Zeus stuff, makes a mention to, gives a mention to some Egyptian stuff about like these temples that exist in these massive structures and how that was sort of a common thing. And then somebody wanted to take the statue of Zeus, and only Xerxes had the guts to do it. Right. Yeah. Was it Zeus? Yeah. Either way, yeah, this massive statue is stolen, stuff like that. Either way, that's Herodotus on this same city wall that Nebuchadnezzar himself would walk on. And that same city wall that was interpreted the moment that the writing began on this wall. And that same means of infiltration was there from the design of the city through its construction, which, like Herodotus said, had never been seen before. It seemed impenetrable. It seemed indomitable. Nobody could take the city of Babylon. And the head of the statue was pure gold. But then comes the silver layer. The Persians are coming. And they may not be as great as Babylon, but they would take Babylon. It was foretold of God through Cyrus that this would happen. We studied the book of Isaiah. We saw that. We knew that God was going to do that. God told Nebuchadnezzar that would happen, and Nebuchadnezzar believed it. His final successor of Belshazzar, however, did not believe it, or at least not until it was too late, and the Persians had already infiltrated. So if you have a skeptical friend who doesn't want to read scripture but would read Herodotus, then this is a great place for you and your, let's be honest, really nerdy friend to show the parallels here, right? It's Histories by Herodotus, it's just book one. And the things that I skimmed over today were chapters 178 through 183. And again, my source was Tufts University's publishing of this online. It's pretty remarkable because it does give us a behind the scenes look at the construction of the city of Babylon. And everything that we know historically aligns with a confirmation of the Daniel account of all this. And when you just use like Herodotus's insights into the construction of the city, you can see how like God's not done with the Euphrates River, and it does seem to speak to how like, yeah, that's where Nimrod first established everything. They have a rich history of impressive structures dating back to the Tower of Babel itself. It's where mankind's languages were first confused and mankind was scattered across the globe. That was it. That's why every study of every ancient language takes us back to Babylon. It's also why Babylon is the name that's used in Revelation, and why it's Babylon that has such a prominent role to play in the last days. It was the beginning of Gentile empires, and then it's used in the description and the vision of the end of Gentile empires, and it gives way to ultimately the reign of Christ forevermore. So Babylon has this critical role to play. What does Babylon represent in the book of Revelation? The woman and the beast are different things. Okay, that's important. Remember that the woman is not the beast, and the beast is not the woman. It's a reference to this massive world system of Babylon. And there have been some commentaries that would say like, oh, that's America. We are Babylon. We're the new Sodom and Gomorrah. We're this world superpower, and we're so debauched that we're becoming the Babylon that's described in Revelation. When we get to this in Revelation, we'll talk in greater detail about it. But don't rule out the possibility that this ancient city doesn't have some part to play, and don't write off completely the possibility for some literal fulfillment about the ancient city of Babylon, because it's actually never really been erased. It wasn't destroyed when the Persians took it. Alexander the Great seemed to really like it. It kind of became the center of operations for a while, and even the Romans, when they would take over, would be like, this place is not bad. And it would even kind of become the base of operations for like the Byzantine Empire, which is sort of the eastern portion of the Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was the Roman Empire, just on the eastern side, and it outlasted ancient Rome to the tune of like 1,000 years. So when we look at the statue vision, gold of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, silver of Cyrus's Persia, bronze of Alexander the Great's Greece, and then we see iron of ancient Rome, and then iron mixed with clay, which, as I've said, I think is a mixture of, it's a Nephilim style mixture. It's the devil's power at work behind the Antichrist's final world empire. That's kind of like Rome part two. When we think Rome, we think Italy and pasta and the Vatican, right? There are whole books written speculating that the Antichrist is going to be like a pope or something. But when you think Rome, it's not just Western Europe. Rome expanded eastward too, into Central Asia, into Assyria. And of the 33 descriptions we have of the Antichrist, there are some of them that are pretty important that describe him as the Assyrian, which means that he could be from Babylon, could be from this city. There were long dormant periods where the city kind of remained uninhabited, and there are a lot of restoration efforts to it. As I said in my sermon on Sunday, even Saddam Hussein went to great pains and spent a lot of money trying to restore this city that was ancient Babylon. Don't rule out the possibility that Babylon could also involve Babylon, literally. It's not just a world system. It's not just a coalition of corrupt governments. It also could include Babylon. It's part of ancient Rome that would fit the description. That would fit the description of like Rome and Rome Part 2, because the Byzantine Empire encompassed this place for 1,000 years as part of, it's sort of the holdover after the Romans were no longer as Roman as they were before, and so don't rule out the possibility of a literal fulfillment, because this city, strictly speaking, still stands today. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. And wow, wouldn't it be fascinating to see if there was also a literal fulfillment in this? Right. So food for thought for Bible nerds, but my hope is especially that you would use this content evangelistically, okay? That you would use this as a discussion point with your skeptical friend. If he or she won't ever read the Bible, but they'll read Herodotus, use Herodotus to point them to Scripture.